welcome to Tea and Strumpets, a Regency romance review. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Kelsey.
And this week we are finally diving back into one of our favorite families of the ton, the Bridgertons.
Woohoo! Specifically, we're finally going to talk about season 2 of the Netflix hit series Bridgerton.
Yes, finally. And Kelsey and I have not yet talked about it at all. Like, we don't really know what the other person thinks. So
no, we've tried really hard because we did it differently. I binged it all in one night. Like, the night it aired, I watched the entire series, and then Zoe caught up eventually.
I finished the last 2 episodes last night, which we're recording this on Tuesday, April 26th. So it took me to April 25th. I have very different TV watching habits, so that shouldn't necessarily give you any indication of what I thought about the show. I'm very bad at TV.
No, that's totally fine. You also have a child and I do not. And so I could stay awake from 4 p.m. to midnight and do nothing but watch Bridgerton. And that was fine.
Well, I'm glad that was fun for you. That sounds stressful to me. I don't know why. I
wasn't by myself. I was with a friend. We had Bridgerton cocktails, thanks to our friends at Pomp and Whimsy.
Yes.
And I was ready to go.
My husband did make a couple of the cocktails. He was really excited about it. And although I am 6 months pregnant, I had like a mini version and I watered mine down a little bit with some seltzer. So I had it like a spritzer version because I wanted to get the flavor, and they were really, really delicious.
Oh God, I've already finished my bottle of Pomp and Whimsy and now I need to go buy more because I'm obsessed.
Yes, it is a delicious gin. I'm a gin girl, and that little gin flavor, I was like, oh man, can't wait until I'm, done having this kid and and maybe done breastfeeding if that all works out for me, so that I can enjoy gin as it is meant to be enjoyed.
Well, now that we've discussed gin, of course, we just have to say there have been a lot of mixed feelings about the show. And I know that we definitely have our fair share of our own opinions, but we also wanted to make this inclusive and talk about the opinions of our listeners. So we had a bunch of people respond to our questions about the show, and there were some really thoughtful insights from people who responded, and we can't wait to share them with you. But first, we would like to thank those who wish to be thanked personally, as well as all our anonymous respondees.
So we would like to thank Sophia. I am sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I hope I'm getting it right. Breda, Kristen A, another Kristen, Zoe, who spells her name like me, and Claudia, Jen, Stephanie T, Sherry, Maddie, and all of those who also answered anonymously. And those people are from here in the US to the UK to Ireland and Indonesia.
That's so exciting. We have an international audience, Zoe.
It's so cool. I love looking at the stats and seeing where everyone's listening from. So hello from wherever you're listening. I hope that listening to this is adding something extra fun into your day.
Yes. And so we first asked all our responders to just rate the show from a score of 1 to 10, because that's how we rate things on this show. So we figured we'd rate Bridgerton the same way. And most of you rated the show favorably. I think our highest score was a 9 out of 10. So very positive response. There was only one score below 5. So really awesome. For me, I'm going to say it was like a solid 8, because I do have some thoughts and opinions, but overall I found it very favorable, and I binged it all in one night. I didn't turn it off. So I feel like that's a good indication of like my enjoyment level. But Zoe, I'm really curious. How would you rate the show?
Well, what's interesting is that I feel like I had 2 different ratings for the show. The first 4 episodes, I was enchanted. Absolutely enchanted. But overall, my experience and my enjoyment, I'm going to rate this show a 3.
Oh.
have a lot to say.
That's okay. That's okay. I will say for me personally, and the reason I can do an 8, and I'm very strong about that, is because if someone hadn't read the books and didn't have that book knowledge, I think it would rate really highly. And that was one thing I had to think about with myself, was like, I had to take it in a separate context, like, because I was mad at it for a while because of the divergences from the book. And then I had to tell myself, no, take the book aside. It's maybe the source material, but that's not everything that's here. You need to take the show for what it is on its own. And I can understand the 3 though, because there were some things I really disliked about it. And that was, I think, some of the things that the divergences that was really hurting me in that sense. But then if I took it just as its own thing without any previous knowledge, I could rate it fairly highly, because it's not like those things are not what I want to see, but I understand like why other people would be like, why those decisions were made, I guess you could say.
So I see what you're saying. And I totally subscribe to think of it as a separate entity thing. Like, I knew that this book is pretty special, and I knew that my feelings about this book are pretty personal as well. So I just I look at it as watching your favorite characters come to life, right? Yeah. Like, that's how I feel about Harry Potter. For those of you who don't know, I still am, but I was a real major Harry Potter fan, super into it from the day, from before the books were even popular. My dad had bought them for me, or bought the first one for me. And it just, I actually probably felt less strongly about the movies coming to life and the job they did there, which I'll admit the movies they're what they are. They're not incredible in my opinion. I think the books outshine them far, 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 far superiorly. However, I don't know. I just got more enjoyment out of the Harry Potter movies, and I'm able to make that separation. And I wanted that to be very clear. I want to also say, obviously, I have a low opinion of this show, but if you loved it, I just really hate hearing people absolutely poo-poo something that I love. And sometimes those negative opinions can then also make me feel negatively. So I'm going to try really hard to not just be bashing on it the whole time, because that's not what I'm here to do. But I do have some major frustrations. And I think there's probably one that most listeners can understand, because of my personal situation, makes me feel even more strongly about it. However, when you say that why they made those choices, I agree that I can see why they made those choices, but I really argue that they made the wrong choices.
Oh, I can agree with that actually, because I will say that I can see why they did it, but I hated that they decided to go that route. There's a few decisions I really, truly hated that they did. And I think that they could have done a different job with it, and it would have been just as entertaining. But they fell on the sword of, this is what people expect to see. And this is I
just think they did such a poor job of putting what people expect to see.
Yeah.
People expect to see 2 people falling in love because this is a romance. And the last 4 episodes, we barely got any screen time with Kate and Anthony.
That's true.
Barely at all. It was so slow. It was so boring. I was so bored. Episode 5, episode 6, episode 7, episode 8. And here's the thing. All of the other storylines, I dislike the Queen storyline. I dislike the Diamond storyline. I dislike, what they did to Penelope and Eloise and kind of going that route. I actually understand that one a little bit more than a lot of the other things. I didn't like the Featherton diversion, and even I really didn't like the Eloise diversions. Here's the thing, though. All of those things could have maybe been okay for me if we had seen Anthony and Kate.
Yeah.
If we had gotten the magic of the chemistry of those 2 actors in the last 4 episodes, if we had gotten some of the happily ever after, instead of such a focus on a ridiculous amount of other storylines, I think I might have found the balance a little bit more palatable.
Yeah, I will say there was a lot of divergences into the side plots, and I agree that I didn't think them a necessity in the extent of how much they were. Like, I would agree. Like, I was really like, okay, let's get back to Kate and Anthony. Let's get back to Kate and Anthony, because I don't care about Eloise having a T-to-T with, like, the printer assistant. I don't care about it.
Like, they took all of these romance tropes that we love and inserted them in places that they aren't in the books, but they are in the series. And I'm just like, and here's the thing, like, I'm glad that they're using the tropes, and I'm glad that they're exploring that. And I think that that's interesting. In fact, I'd love to talk a little bit about the Featherington storyline.
Oh, our listeners have opinions on it, so we'll get to that. Don't worry.
Excellent. But I feel like the books, I just felt like the book does it better. All the books do it so much better. And there were so many gems from this book in particular that they lost out on. Now, setting that aside, I think the thing that was really hard for me to swallow was, you know, the love triangle instead of the pure enemies to lovers. What I find to be special about this book, and also special about romance in general, the good ones, is when we have women supporting women. And in this series, we had a lot of women fighting women.
That was my biggest annoyance with the show. Hands down, the first thing I said, I was like, love triangle, unnecessary. Like,
but they could have done it. They could have done.
They didn't have to get to the wedding.
Better. Yes.
But that's the thing, too, is they're like, but Edwina's like, I love him. I'm like, no, you don't, Edwina. You don't. Like, just stop. You don't.
Well, and I feel so bad because the actress who plays Edwina is, like, brilliant and beautiful and interesting and, like, fascinating. Like, I loved watching her, and I think she has so much talent. But, like, they gave her a shitty character. Edwina in the books is so much more interesting.
Well, I love it. She's bookish. She doesn't want to go to society events. Like, she's like, I like the things, but, like, I'm doing it for you, Kate. Like, there's just so much more of a bond. But I will say this, too. One of the scenes I absolutely hated was, you know, Edwina runs away from the marriage and she's in the room, and then Mary kind of comes at Kate and, like, gets mad at Kate. And I'm like, no, Mary would not do that. Mary would sit those two girls down and she would speak to both of them. She would not shut Kate out like that. Absolutely not.
I didn't like that. And when Edwina finally gets to be mad at Kate, I felt like she deserved that scene based on what the character had experienced in the show. Like, she deserved to yell at Kate. But, like, Kate and Edwina as characters didn't deserve to have their storylines written that way when it could have been so much more interesting. So I agree with you here where you're saying, like, they chose to do it that way because they think that's what people want to see. But I think that they should realize that romance doesn't highlight that generally. Like the new good popular romance novels don't highlight that, you know, woman on woman hate, because that's not what women want to read about. Like, we want to see each other lifting each other up and empowering each other. Now, the girls had a fine, you know, reconciliation at the end, but man, did we have to slog along for it. And that just isn't fun for me to watch.
Yeah, that was like an entire episode of, like, that scene. And it was, yeah, it really wasn't good. And I didn't like that in that sense.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm just going to bring in, because I know that, like, one of our listeners taps into this where she says, like, in a little bit different, she's like, I love Edwina's character and the strength and resilience she shows. While it unnerved me a bit to watch them go through their engagement and almost get married, which obviously didn't happen in the book, I think it was necessary, or at least an acceptable change for a TV show where the drama and tension needs to be on a larger scale.
But I just think, like, you have such an intimate show. Like, it is an intimate show about people falling in love. I don't think it has to be on a larger scale. I mean, it could have been, and they it could have been that, I don't know. I think they could have done it, but they certainly didn't need to get to the wedding.
No, I don't think they needed to get to the wedding, because I also do agree, because then it also talks about how they felt they couldn't do a marriage of convenience again, because that's what they had in season 1. And they felt that they had to really diverge from that, because it's like, they're like, oh, well, Bridgerton just does marriages of convenience. I understand why they wanted to pull away from that.
Yes. And there's a great article on Slate written by Vanessa Zoltan specifically about that, about how Bridgerton, the divergence is the B scene, right? Because the B scene causes the marriage of convenience.
Yeah.
They at least kept the B scene sort of in there.
We've had differing opinions on that. There's one where one of our listeners really loves what they did with it, because they felt the original B scene was a little cringy and they didn't like it, versus others were very upset that they didn't keep the B scene as it was, because it's such a pivotal moment in the story.
Yeah, I'm at the divergence of a book versus a media version of it. And I think both are great. Like, I actually really liked the B scene in the book, and I also really liked it in the TV show. I thought that they conveyed that emotion and that tension really beautifully. One of my biggest issues, though, and the B scene is one of the scenes that you can see this happen, is that all of the flowers in Bridgerton are very fake. They are fake flowers. They are not real flowers. When they like pan in on leaves, like, you'll see they're like plastic leaves. Like, you can see that. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I'm sorry, listeners, but it is so bad. So when Kate runs away from Anthony after that scene and presses up against a wall of wisteria, it's fake flowers, and it is so fake looking. I don't understand. Like, the flowers have no movement. They're obviously not real. And it's just like, this is a big budget, very successful show. I don't understand how for these like close-up scenes they can't have flowers. So anyhow, sorry.
It's so funny because I didn't notice that whatsoever, and I just love the fact that you did, and like you're like it ruins it for me, because I understand there's things that once I see it in a movie, like a show, I can't unsee it, but I never saw this, so like I'm okay.
It's so bad. There's another scene where like Violet and Daphne are like arranging flowers within the house, and they have like those, you know, when you go to buy flowers at Michael and they're like, the stems are like 15 feet long.
Oh yeah.
Okay, not 15 feet, but they're extra long for fake flowers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. They're all those extremely long stem fake flowers, and they're just like lifting them up, and I'm just like, what is going on? And even when in the scene where Kate and Anthony finally like get together, all of those flowers, again, fake. Around Edmund's grave, fake. Everything is such fake flowers, and they couldn't even just like do something with the computer to make it look a little softer. I can't believe it.
I love you, Zoe, because you really hone in on things that no one else saw.
So just while I'm talking about things I hate, sorry, as I said, I wouldn't bash it. Maybe I'll mention some of the other things that made it difficult for me to connect with the show. The fake flowers took me out of it because I kept seeing it and going, you have these incredible costumes, incredible hair, incredible sets, incredible, like, you know, rolling hills. And then you put a fake wisteria right there. I just didn't quite, it was a disconnect. I also really dislike Vitamin String Quartet. Like,
we talked about that in season 1. Like,
yeah, it just makes my spine tingle. It's like nails on a chalkboard for me. So I really try to detach from that, but man, I hate it. I hate it so much. And my husband also, every time it came on, was like, VSQ. so
well, it's really funny because a lot of people were like, why did they choose Wrecking Ball of all songs for this scene?
Oh, it was bad. It was very bad. Okay. So I suppose I should get to my main qualm with it. Mm-hmm. I am not a fan of a Coma.
Yes.
I am not a fan of
down. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not a fan of a Coma for many reasons. Certainly the way that this happened, when she fell off that horse and the way that she struck her head on the rock and the whole filming of it, I don't know, you'll probably agree with me as a horse person. Man, they could have made that look way cooler.
They could have.
They could have. The horse should have slipped. The horse should have fallen partially on her. Like it could have been way more interesting.
Yeah.
And she had a cut on the back of her head, and she didn't wake up for days. Days.
I mean, like she could have just had a fever. That seems more likely because it was raining and then she had a cut on her head. A fever would have been so much better. And then you get delirious scenes.
Yes.
Oh, that's always lovely when they have a delirious moment and then they have like a vision of the person, but they think that can't be it. I agree.
Yeah.
They should have gone with fever delirium. Much better.
Much better. She would have like been kind of like groggy when they got home, but then, the next morning she develops a fever and blah, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
But a coma she was in a coma for at least 3 days. I think it seemed like someone said a week at the beginning of it. It's like, it's been a week. And then someone said it's been 3 days or something. And so I got a little confused about the amount of time. However, my father had a pulmonary embolism and slipped into a coma, and he didn't wake up. And what I realized from that is almost no one wakes up from comas. Almost no one. And so for me, this was really frustrating because she doesn't look like she's in a coma. Like she
looks
doesn't
very healthy for being in a coma.
It was very Sleeping Beauty. And then she Edwina woke up like that. And so, I have a very personal connection to comas. Mm-hmm. And I get it. It's a book. But I, at this point, felt so far away from Happily Ever After because I'm like, this is episode 8. This is episode 8, and they're not even married yet.
Yeah.
We don't get any Happily Ever After. We don't even get to see the wedding. We don't get to have any of that euphoria that you're waiting for at the Happily Ever After. Mm-hmm. And my notes here for episode 8, I'm going to just read the first ones. The episode 8 was the one that I had a million notes about. So my first note is all in caps. It says, an hour and 11 minutes because the next is, she's been in a coma for a week. She is brain dead. What the actual F? The next one is, I'm actually furious. The next one is, I can't believe I have to keep watching this. The next one is, I'm literally itching for this to be over. The next one is, in all caps, Kate is in a goddamn coma. We don't get any fun romantic tension. What the F? I'm super furious. Mm-hmm. And then it's just like, I hate all these other stupid storylines because I'm just like, I'm here for Kate and Anthony.
Yes.
This is their story. Mm-hmm. And I get nothing. This is a couple lines later. I'm literally furious that we are on the last episode and I'm not watching Anthony and Kate. Anyhow, so... I just, I feel like they threw in so many tropes to Kate and Anthony's story. Mm-hmm. Kate and Anthony's story originally was enemies to lovers and forced marriage, right? Yeah. Marriage of convenience. Mm-hmm. But then it was enemies to lovers, my sister's fiance, left at the altar, a coma, there's just so many tropes. And I just was I just want to see them interact. I want to see them be. And so I don't know. It just didn't work for me.
I would say that. Now, on a completely separate note, not storyline related. And this is a comment from one of our listeners in the listener's opinion. And I loved it because I was unaware of this. And even now, just reflecting back, it's making me think of things a little bit differently and understanding why they went that route. So, it says the first opinion was, there were extreme Bollywood vibes throughout season 2. Mm-hmm. Neck kisses, marry my sister triangles, flirtations via bangles, etc. And I loved it. That was their opinion. And I was like, I did not know any of this. How interesting.
That is true. I am not familiar with Bollywood either, but that is fascinating and awesome. Yeah. Now, there's also an article, I can't remember where it is, but it was written about the Southeast Asian representation in Bridgerton. And there was some criticism of it because a lot of the terminology they use is mixing up different regions. So it isn't clear what region of India these women come from. I, as a, someone who really knows nothing about Indian culture.
As a white, ignorant American.
Yes. But I wonder if that was maybe intentional to kind of, again, show that this is a fantasy world. Like, this is a world where colonialism doesn't really exist, right? So there's already, you know, perhaps there are already some arguments that can be made for that, but we are in a fantasy, right? This is romance fantasy. This is Regency fantasy. So I wonder if actually that was intentional to kind of pull from lots of different areas of Indian culture and different regions to just say that these women represent that, you know, and not they are this. I don't know. I have, like I said, I'm coming from a place of ignorance. I just wondered if that's where they came from. The reason that I think that that's probably a very generous point of view to give to the authors is that they haven't come out and said that. And if they came out and said that, be like, well, we did this so that it was that. That would be like a lovely thing to admit. So anyhow, it's probably a little generous of me to think that maybe they did that.
But you never know. They may have also, in the sense of it is a fantasy world. So why not pull phrasing traditions from the whole region to encompass it as a whole, you know, and saying that, like, if in a perfect world, we're not so blocked out by all this, you know, I don't know, speculation on my part. But anyway, as far as things that we love, though, there was a major consensus on the fact that Simone Ashley was the perfect Kate.
Oh, yes. And their chemistry was brilliant.
Yes. Both Jonathan Bailey and Simone Ashley sizzled on screen, and that's a quote.
Yes.
I think that's where, and a few listeners commented on the fact that we didn't get some of, like, the more pivotal scenes. I know that it was, I don't know who brought it up, but someone brought up the library scene and Kate's fear of thunderstorms. And those were really pivotal moments. Like, they could have, like you said, they could have taken that thunderstorm scene, even though, like, originally it happened after they were married, you know, they're in bed together, you know, that's where it kind of comes to it. Like, they put it into the library of the house. It could have been so much more engaging and dramatic and, like, so much more of that passionate moment. And I felt let down by the thunder scene because it was such a key moment for Kate and Anthony and, like, a bonding moment, especially once they had the vulnerability of Anthony with the bee and, like, kind of showing that vulnerability to Kate. And then this is Kate showing her major vulnerability to Anthony.
So I feel similarly. I completely agree with the thunder scene. I have a note here that's just like, I just really miss that. Like, that vulnerability of Kate's, like, it makes her more dimensional too. But for me, the thing that they got, like, you know, again, they got so close but didn't go over the line, like the finish line for, was Anthony's father connection, right? So he lost his father at a young age, and that episode in the beginning where they show that Anthony and I lost our fathers at the same age. And, like, so I really, like, you can listen to our episode number 7 about the Viscount Who Loved Me. And I think I go into that a little bit more. But so I really connect with Anthony and the way that he reacted to his father's loss and being the oldest and all those things. Like, I have a lot of this. I can really empathize. However, the thing that I think made the biggest sense of his character was the fact that Anthony did not believe that he would live to be older than his father.
Yes, that was a huge factor in this, and they didn't touch upon that at all.
And that was why he was like, I do need to get married right now. And I think that leaving it out was a big loss. Like, it would have required more than one scene of explanation, like more than one moment of just dropping the information. But I feel like that is a huge part of his character and driving to why he's like, I need to do this now. I need to keep the line going. Like, because I only have so much time. And like, I think that they did such a beautiful job with all of the other dimensions of his relationship with his father, bringing in the way he talked to Violet about it and saying like, you weren't there afterwards and I can't do that to someone. Like that was heart-wrenching and beautiful. The way he talked to Gregory at the last episode.
Oh my gosh.
Oh
the
my God,
scene between the two of them. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I totally cried. So I feel like they again got like so close but didn't go over the finish line, and I think it was the wrong choice.
I agree, and so does at least one of our people. They say, quote, "I wish they included more Edmund flashbacks and Kate's childhood trauma, Storms. I felt that the show missed out on deepening some of the relationships that we read about in the book. Kate Mary, Kate Anthony, Anthony Edmund. I was also disappointed." Oh, never mind. We can cut that one out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, you know, there was a huge missed opportunity. And I felt that way too. Like, again, going back to the whole marriage triangle, it was so difficult in the sense that for me, they kept showing how close Edwina and Kate were. They're so close. They're so close. And then suddenly there's this big hullabaloo and it drives this huge wedge between them. And that just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Because it never would have gotten to that point because Edwina would have talked to Kate. She would have listened to Kate. She wouldn't have accepted Anthony. Like, had he proposed to her, she probably wouldn't have because she wouldn't have missed the signs that the two of them had chemistry.
Yeah. So a lot of our listeners also kind of talked about or mentioned that they enjoyed this season more than season 1. And it's interesting because I rate this season lower because of my frustrations with it. And maybe because I also think it had the potential to be so much better. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of notes here where I just write like, and this is an Arrested Development kind of quote here, but I don't care for Daphne. Like, I just don't. I don't care for her. I don't particularly care for the actress. Every time she came back this season, I was like, yeah, I'm so glad that this season isn't about her. Mm-hmm. Like, I am like, give me Kate all day. I think I rate this season lower because I feel like you had this amazingness and you did that with it.
Yeah, I think in season 1, it was more like you took a book that wasn't like most people's favorite in the series and you made it like palatable and you made it interesting. You know, you did a lot of cool, interesting things. And then it was like they tried too hard to make this season interesting when the book itself is interesting. Although
it's so interesting.
Yeah, in my opinion anyway. I know someone actually wrote that they felt they reread the book and they felt it was kind of bland and they kind of liked the like interestingness that happened in the season, but they felt that it needed a more modern. They felt that the book, because it was written, you know, over 20 years ago, it just needed an update. And so for them, it was like, yes, this book is getting the update it needs. But then again, I don't know their opinion, but that could be because the first 4 episodes were like hot, fiery tension.
Yeah, the first 4 episodes.
And then the second half got really into the side stories. And I'm going to pull us away from Kate and Anthony and all that because the side stories feature so heavily, so we really need to address them.
We do. And there's a few of them. I think we can address one very quickly.
Yes.
Benedict.
Oh my God.
He's the best brother.
He's the best brother.
He's the absolute best.
Which is interesting because someone even wrote that their opinion of Colin was like, what the hell are you doing with Colin? Colin's supposed to be great and you're making him this broody, moody character and no one likes him. And yet Benedict is like the best.
Benedict. I'm like all about Benedict and like give me more Benedict time. Although this show, again, I think they're trying to make everything big. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I think things got a little bit caricature-y, and I'll talk about that in a few other storylines. Mm-hmm. So Benedict's like drinking and drug use got like a little over the top, but only at the end. Like when he's drunk at the table or like high at the table, like we were dying. That was fabulous. I loved that so much. That was so great. But like towards the end when Anthony comes in for his opinion and is like, are you like this all the time? I'm like, ugh, they're trying to make this a thing.
Yeah. They're trying to give him his redemptions. They're probably going to have a savior moment where he's like a drunkard and like his story is like a savior moment, which I don't think they need. But then again, I felt at the same time too, the reason why I actually enjoyed Benedict's storyline was, one, because they weren't shoving it at you. It was kind of just like, you kind of just saw scenes of it. Yes. And a lot of it does have to do with, even in his book, which is he's trying to figure out who Benedict is, because he's just the second Bridgerton brother. He's B Bridgerton. And that's, in his book, that was a big thing. He didn't feel like his own entity. And I think that that storyline I did approve of, in the sense that we're getting that from him.
Yes. No, I agree. I think it's interesting because they've made already a ton of changes with him. In season 1, we were like, is he going to be queer? I'm into that. I'm following you. In season 2, they made his art be a big deal, which he does not reveal to his family at all. So like they don't know that about him even a little bit. And so they've given him more, and I'm just like, if you keep doing what you're doing with him, you have me. Like you've got me so hard. So I loved pretty much everything about Benedict. I have like a note every episode that's just like, Benedict is the best brother. Benedict High is delightful. I have later on, I said something where I was like, wait, what? We don't get any naked Benedict? And then I was like, oh, there's his butt.
There we go. We got it. No, I think that's 100% agree with that.
So shall we talk about another storyline now?
Yeah, let's talk about another one. Which one do you want to talk about next? Because we can talk about a few of them.
Let's be real quick. Let's do the shorter ones, and then we'll get into the big Penelope's and Featherington's last. So we have the Mondrich. I don't know what they're doing with him.
I don't know either. And it's actually really funny because I randomly have this, I just have it up on the screen. It was a listener's opinion. And basically they're like, it fell flat for me due to the lack of the Duke. Like, we wanted some Bridgerton Page, which, who doesn't? He should have been there. Maybe season 3?
But
like, I understand he's busy and he wanted to, but he didn't want to be known as the Duke. And I understand.
Kelsey, he is Dungeons and Dragoning right now. This is very important business. I need to see him as a barbarian or whatever he's going to be.
That's fantastic. That's amazing. Well, and I understand he didn't want to get stuck in this role of being the Duke. And so he chose to leave it. But I'm just like, you couldn't come back for like one episode. And
maybe he will.
Especially because they even say, now, Will Mondros is trying to create this new business for himself. And like he and the Duke had such a tight relationship in season 1. And now that there's no Duke, it's like he's trying to now create this business and he's relying on
Colin, it looks like it's going to be.
Interestingly enough, I don't know what Colin's doing, honestly. The side note, I don't know what they're doing with Colin. Colin was always my favorite. And honestly, he's kind of my least favorite at the moment.
Least favorite. Gregory is higher in my regard than Colin.
Yeah. Although there was one instance, because someone brought this up about Colin. They're like, I really hated the nasty things that Colin said about Penelope. And then Penelope overheard him. But then that was very reminiscent of how Benedict's book ends. But then I was really mad at how they chose Penelope to like snivel and cry away. And I'm just like, no. Yeah. Penelope goes out and says, well, I don't want to be with you anyway. Like, I didn't ask you to marry me.
Yeah. And so someone who said, one of our listeners said like that they didn't like those mean-spirited comments from Colin. I liked that they put that in there because it's in the spirit of what happens in the book. But again, that's like not getting it over the finish line. Yeah. Where
Penelope
like
needed
in the
a better
book,
reaction.
it's so much better. It is so much better. Because exactly that, like Colin says, I'll never marry Penelope Featherington. Like, and then she says, she's standing right there and she goes, well, I never asked you to marry me. And it's just like devastating. Yeah. But I think I see what they're doing. And so maybe this is the Whistledown storyline, but they're making her desperate and vindictive. You know, she's so gonna
none of those things, which like, I mean,
she's cunning and shrewd.
Yeah.
But not desperate and vindictive.
I know. Well, and I know we were going to talk about this a little bit later because it's a big one, but I feel like this is just a natural segue in the sense of like, I hated what happened between Penelope and Eloise. Like, I understand. No.
I understood it the most of all of the changes.
I understood
but I hated it.
But I hated it because once again, their pivotal relationship point is two women fighting with each other. Mm-hmm. There's nothing else going on with it. And I understood like Eloise needed to find out and she could have been hurt, but also too, Penelope didn't need to destroy Eloise in society's name by writing about her.
Oh, see, that was the part that I liked the most. I liked that part the most. I liked that because that is something Lady Whistledown would do. She would use her position to protect those around her to her detriment. So I felt like in that moment, like that was the cunning moment of Penelope being like, I can say this to, like I can save Eloise, right? Mm-hmm. By doing this horrible thing.
Yeah.
But I think that again, they made it a touch more mean-spirited than it needed to be. And then I think that Eloise figuring out that it was Penelope now is just so disinteresting.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's like, and the fact that Eloise had to tear apart Penelope's room and find all of it, she never would have done that.
No,
she never would have done that. She would have confronted her immediately and they would have talked it out and it would have been, but the fact that she like tore apart Penelope's room and found all this and then they had to find each other after Penelope had this devastating blow. I'm like, it was unnecessary. And again, it's one thing. I didn't agree with it. I don't like the love triangle that they created between the sisters. However, I could look past this. But then if you're now going to your second time pitting women against women in a book that was 100% all about strong female relationships.
Yep.
One of the best examples of strong female relationships in so many different ways. And now you're using that not once, but twice. You're using the drama of female against female. That's not the point of this series. That's not what we want to see.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. And I just felt very frustrated with that. I thought it was a very bold decision to have Eloise had to have all these people figure out who Lady Whistledown is now. I think the tension of Eloise not knowing, but Penelope still knowing what she did to Eloise would actually have made for way more interesting fodder. But they obviously just want to like put women at odds with each other. So really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah, so they also like had Violet and Lady Danbury kind of at odds with each other after the wedding, which was like, why? They actually should be allies here. And like Lady Danbury was actually kind of like a couple times, she 100% flipped on the coin with Kate. I have like quotes from a couple lines, but they're basically like at one point she was, telling Kate how to behave this way and then saying to behave that way. And I just felt like it was the widow thing. It was that, Kate was like, I'm going to be a spinster and, you obviously live a life, a happy life. And Danbury was like, I've lived a full life. I'm a widow. Like I experienced all those things. Like, yes, I appreciate my independence now, but I also got to have the joy of all that. And then later, Lady Danbury is just like flipped on the other side of the coin. Anyhow, I just think they just really, really did a bad job with that.
But I think they tried to put Lady Danbury in more, which like she's such a great character. But part of the greatness of her character is like she kind of like comes in and comes out. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you love every scene with her. And then I think they just were trying to put more of her in the show because she's such a favorite of the show, which I get. But again, it was when you're flipping her around so much, it kind of loses the character that's there. I definitely miss Lady Danbury from the book. I feel like the Lady Danbury on screen and on page are really, really different. I love them both. But I, again, think that Lady Danbury from the book is a lot more nuanced and shrewd and interesting. I think the actress that portrays her is, just incredible. Like 100%. She's so interesting and fabulous, but she's like too spry for me. And she's like too, I don't know. She's too, I think spry is like the perfect word. Yeah, I think so. But I get that because she's just like two hands in the pot versus Lady Danbury isn't Like, she doesn't want to dirty her hands in the pot, but she'll help. She'll like
she's conducting the orchestra, but you just don't see that she's pulling the strings.
She'll tell you to stir the pot. She'll get you to stir the pot, but she's not going to be the one holding the spoon.
And that makes sense for a television adaptation, why that kind of nuance is not really doable. However, let's get back a little bit to Penelope and Eloise, because I want to talk a little bit about Eloise's storyline, because that ties into Penelope and Eloise. And I loved Eloise season 1. I was just like, more Eloise, please. And they gave us more this season, and I was not a fan.
But it wasn't the Eloise you wanted to see. It started there where she was like sneaking out to go see like the speeches and have the pamphlet, and then it kind of went downhill.
She just like her obsession with finding Whistledown like wasn't Eloise to me. Like it was just like, I don't know. But more than that, I felt like the actress became an absolute caricature. Like everything was the way that she was just like, like it was very frantic, and like her speech pattern and her behavior and her posture, which set her aside a little bit in the first season as somebody a little bit different, was just magnified about 10 times and made her almost unwatchable for me, where I just was like, you need to chill out, Eloise. First of all, you are not conforming at all, which is fine. I don't want Eloise to conform. But it just felt like it was so over the top. She never sat up straight. She was constantly slouching. She was constantly just like, throwing a, snide comment at her family and her mother. And the way that she would, whenever she said like, oh, I'm going shopping, like it was so obvious she was lying. Like everything she said was so obvious, that I really felt like it was just, it felt extremely overacted to me. Like extremely, which is crazy because, again, I think the actress is brilliant. I couldn't with her. And I didn't care about her and Theo. I love a aristocracy and a working class. I love it. Like, give it to me all day. And it's fine if that turns out to be Eloise. But I just couldn't care because she was so like, I don't know. She just was so odd. Like the character I couldn't connect with. I couldn't connect with like any of the decisions that she made at all in this season. And it made me sad.
Well, no, and I think it's going to make, it's going to be giving her potentially a storyline a little bit more difficult because she's going to have to drastically change her character.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure how they're going to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if they actually have a plan for her or not. And one of our listeners asked that of us. They asked, how do you feel about how they're using Marina? Do you think they'll still have her die off screen now that we're invested in her, and now that they brought her back this season? So I found it really interesting that they brought her back. I found it really interesting that we met Sir Philip.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that he liked botany. I found it interesting that we saw that Marina was not happy and she had her twins.
Yeah. And like you get her, but I find it really interesting because the Sir Philip Crane character is still the very Sir Philip Crane character.
Very.
Like he's very much the character, but then you have Marina there and like, yeah, again, you can see that it's not what she pictured. So again, like I'm not sure what they're going to do with that because it was only like one episode that she was there, so it wasn't like a huge thing. But they did make a point of bringing her back. But was it because they wanted to give Colin more backstory?
But why talk about Sir Philip and why have her be unhappy?
Well, exactly. But I don't know. Like like I didn't understand any of that, to be perfectly honest.
I didn't either. It makes me think that they are still thinking about him for Eloise. I think Hyacinth is too young to say like, oh, they'll use him for Hyacinth. Maybe there's a friend character somewhere that we don't know about. I don't know. But
I don't know. I don't understand because I can't believe that they would but again, they don't even think they're going to get to a Hyacinth series. They're not even sure if they're going to get to that because there's There's a guaranteed 4 seasons. That was a question down below. Yes, listeners, there's guaranteed 4 seasons. But whether or not it's going to be the next season's going to be only one sibling having a storyline or maybe two, that's been a speculation of like having kind of joint storylines. I'm interested in that too, though, because interestingly enough, as we talked about, Francesca is like also one of our favorite books. She is so not in this series. So there was one moment they're like, we're going for a family walk. And Francesca had been in the earlier scene. And then suddenly in the next episode, they go for a family walk and there's zero Francesca. And I'm like,
why right. She wasn't at the ball at the end, too.
She's like in some scenes and then she disappears and there's no mention of her whatsoever. But she is in scenes. So they still have this actress cast. But I guess they just like don't know what to do with her because she isn't one of those big personalities. But I'm also like, don't do Francesca dirty because her story is like beautiful.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't even catch that this time. I was too irritated with other things.
I'm minorly obsessed with Francesca, but I also just hate it when you're like, we're going for a family outing. You're missing a sibling. Yeah. That's important. But also, too, like because they're so focused on Eloise's, like, this was her come out. Francesca's a year younger than Eloise.
Yeah.
Like, literally,
so maybe we'll
to
see
the
her
day
next
1
season.
year. So, like, she should be ready. Like, she should be a bit in scenes because she's the next one on the list.
Yeah. So we've got a couple more storylines to address. I don't even particularly really want to address the Queen storyline.
Not really. I don't really care about that one.
Either you love it or you hate it or you fall in the middle. But I understand it's a driving force, and the general population can understand that the Queen drives things. Okay, fine. Let's just move on.
Sorry if you wanted to hear more about that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Featherington storyline.
Yes.
So I found it really interesting at first. I found it really interesting.
I did as well. It definitely was. I was very intrigued by it.
Yeah.
At first. And I was like very confused by it as well. I was like,
yeah.
Because I was like, what are we doing here? This is interesting.
Also, I think the actor kind of looks like an adult version of Michael Cera, who is an adult, but I just feel like he really looks like that.
Adult version of Michael Cera.
But yeah, so then it was like so interesting. I was like, of course he's going to be young. Of course he's going to be handsome. Mm-hmm. But then he comes in, he's got money, he does the things, he's fine. And then I'm like, oh, he's going to marry Cressida Cowper. I'm kind of into this.
Yeah.
Like this is interesting. And then the scheme, it just was like trope after trope after trope, right?
Yeah.
It's like the young man that inherits when you think he's going to be old. And then he, is trying to get with the evil woman. Mm-hmm. Like, and then he...
turns out he has no money.
He's penniless and he's running like a scheme. And then he's trapped into a marriage of convenience with Prudence. But then actually he falls for an older woman.
Yeah.
Like, so I have to say, honestly, like I absolutely love, oh my gosh, what's the not the Duke Who Didn't, it's it's the Shanna Gallen Survivor series book about a Duke a Dozen, I think it is.
Didn't we read this one?
We did on the podcast, and then there's Phineas and he's younger, and there's Annabelle, who's older. And honestly, like those two actors would be perfect for those two roles. However, I found it unfortunate because I love the younger man, older woman trope, but I found him already skeezy before that. And so then when he's coming on to Mrs. Featherington, I was kind of skeezed out by it instead of... I just
thought it was like, for me, like... He's like, oh, I fell for you. I'm like, I don't, like, for me, I never felt the genuine of it. Again, he gave the skeezy vibe. So it just felt like he was working an angle. He was like, I'm just going to be interested in her because then she's going to give me more of what I want.
Yeah. And then at the end, she does her cunning thing. I love how cunning she is.
Yeah,
I love that she's this
really liked Portia in this one. They're like, go, Portia, go. Like, she's like... Yeah.
She's so morally gray, and I find that fascinating about her. But I also found it really out of character that all of a sudden she was just like, I'm a mother, like my daughters. Because they did a good job this season of making her be shittier to Penelope.
Yeah, well, and that's the whole thing is like everyone just hates how Portia is to Penelope, and that's a big driving force in Penelope and Colin's book, and there's like a whole confrontation before it. And then at the end of it, she's like, these are my kids, don't mess with Mama Bear. And I'm like, Mama Bear, you don't even seem to like your kids most of the time unless they can do something for you.
And she addressed that, but I just felt a bit incongruous for me, although I liked where it ended. Like, I was like, okay, cool. She's kicking him out. He's going to America, and they're going to be okay for a little while, theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
But then why did I have to watch all of that?
Yeah. Why was it necessary?
Why did I have to watch all
And there
of
was a lot of it, and it kept going back to it. And like...
a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
I would have preferred more Anthony and Kate. And that's where I became resentful of that storyline at the end, because I was like, I would have liked more Anthony and Kate, please.
Yeah.
Like, if you had given me a little more Anthony and Kate and just a little bit less of that, it might have worked out, but you didn't. And meh. So that's, I enjoyed the twists and turns of that story. I thought it was interesting. I don't know what the plan is for the Featheringtons. I think that Prudence, there's opportunities for Prudence. Mm-hmm. I think that they could do more with her character.
Agreed.
I'm interested to see what they do, but I don't know where they're going. I think we'll definitely see. I think Mrs. Featherington noticed the spark between Colin. She noticed Penelope's interest in Colin, and of course she'd want to align her family with the Bridgertons. Mm-hmm. But that's not how it works in the books, which again I think is more interesting, which is that like she thinks that Penelope has no chance with the Bridgertons.
But she thinks that Penelope is going to grow old with her.
Yeah,
like she's like, Penelope's going to be my caretaker. I married off the two older girls. Now Penelope's going to take care of me.
Yeah, so I don't know. I really like Portia in the show because she's so interesting. Mm-hmm. But I don't know where they're going. I don't know.
I don't know either. But let's share, because we don't know where they're going with this, and I think we've covered a good basis. I think we want to share some of the opinions on what we might expect for season 3.
For season 3, yeah.
Our favorite hope is, I like this one, more butts. Lots more butts.
I would like more butts. I mean, this show was very light on sex, and that was disappointing. I heard it was going to be more chaste, and so I was like, oh, that's a poor choice. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
But they never had our characters together on screen, and they didn't get married until the last 5 minutes, and we didn't see the
didn't even have one encounter. They didn't even have any encounters until like the second to last episode.
No, yeah, it was the last episode, wasn't it? Oh, no, it was second to last.
Second to last episode, because then she goes in a coma, because remember.
Oh, yeah, and I have problems with the whole having sex with a virgin outside. We all have to infer that Kate is most likely a virgin, and they just, like, do it where anyone could. Again, voyeurism, great, like, all of those things. But it just was, like, all of a sudden, like, it was very sudden. And okay, but let's talk about season 3. Okay.
Yes. One thing was, as a opinion, a hope, a thing, and one person brings in the point, which I didn't realize because clearly I don't read enough, was they wonder what a difference having a new showrunner will make to the show. So Chris Van Dusen, did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, Chris Van Dusen created Bridgerton. It was his baby. Part of me feels that he did not want to leave and that Shonda Rhimes is trying to oust him to claim the show as hers, but it was such a runaway success. Jess Bronwell is the new showrunner. I hope she will keep the Bridgerton magic alive and well for season 3 and 4. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a woman, right? Mm-hmm. Jess Brownell. So hopefully maybe she'll not have women hating women so much. We'll see. Yeah. I don't know anything about her.
It'll be very that is interesting, though, because to think a man was the showrunner and suddenly we have a lot more women hating women because, you know.
He, I believe, is gay, you know, but again, so there's a little bit different perspective there than like us, just the straight white man.
But I will
However,
say,
there's also a huge team of writers and producers, and there's a lot of outside influences. I don't think you can pin it on one person.
I don't think you can, and I'm not blaming him. I just find it interesting that I wonder if things had been different if maybe said showrunner was, like, said visionary was a woman, in the sense of, like, was more likely to challenge the trope of women against women in that sense. So I wonder if that may have been it. If they'd been more willing to take the risk of, let's not do what's expected, let's not do what's typical, and having two women fight against each other and, like, have a love triangle with a man, let's maybe try to push it a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm hopeful, because I didn't particularly love this season and the choices that they made. I'm hopeful that a new showrunner will maybe bring back some of the magic of the books.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I also wonder, great thought there from one of our listeners. I think a lot of our listeners are asking, you know, for their hopes for season 3, like they're kind of asking a question, which is, who is it going to be about?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. They did not make that clear like they did with Anthony's bee buzzing around, you know, at the end of season 1.
Mm-hmm. And I will say they very much, like, again, they seem to have set up Benedict, but again, there's a lot of setting up Colin and Penelope. So there's a lot of interest to see whether or not they're just going to go straight to Colin and Penelope. I feel like they won't.
I think it's a bad decision to do that, because
so
Colin
too.
and Penelope seem young still. I think that on top of that, I think that such an integral part of Colin and Penelope's story is revealing that she is Lady Whistledown.
Agreed, especially revealing it to everyone. But I wonder if maybe they'll choose to keep that going, in the sense maybe we'll get a little bit of an Eloise Penelope, like, alliance in the next season after they have the big fight scene. But then maybe they have a bit of an alliance, and through that alliance, then, because part of Colin and Penelope's storyline is he thinks Eloise is Lady Whistledown.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of that. So I'm wondering if maybe, like, there's going to be an alliance. I really would like Colin to get a little bit more interesting before Penelope comes on board, because right now he's not so interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to see what happens, like what he's doing with Will Mondrick. I guess I'm hoping that storyline will give him something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I literally wrote, like, F Colin at one point, because I was so angry at him for siding with Featherington and not Mondrick. And then turns out it was a ruse.
Mm-hmm.
He had figured out that, you know, he was actually, like, looking out for Penelope. But all of his comments to Penelope, like, you're so loyal, you're so steadfast, it's like too much. You know what I mean? It's too much. He should know by now that, like, she likes him.
Yeah.
Like, and yes, I know he's adult in the books, but anyhow, so my personal opinion is that I think they're going to do Benedict, and I think they're going to develop some Penelope and Colin. That's my gut feeling. And a lot of our listeners have opinions about their hopes for Benedict. Mm-hmm. They say things like, here's hoping they make Benedict less of a jerk towards Sophie. Fair point.
But then there's also people who are still here for queer Benedict and would really like that to happen, but not in, like, a token sense, but in a genuine affection sense. So
yes, I would be so there for that story. You could give him Scott instead of Sophie or whoever. Mm-hmm. I don't care. I just love Benedict. Like, whatever they want to do. With him, I am down.
Yeah. People are also very much saying that they're hoping, because we didn't get as much of it in the series, as you said. We got very little Kate and Anthony towards the end, and everyone wants to see more Kate and Anthony in season 3. They want to see the domestic bliss. They want to see, like, maybe some, like, vying for, like, the matriarch role with Violet and Kate. You know, like, see how that dynamic works out. They are hoping that maybe we'll get a baby Edmund, you know, like, there's a lot of hoping that Kate and Anthony will still play a big role in the next scene. Oh, I see you highlighted.
Oh, no, I was looking at things. Sorry.
But I think that's so she highlighted, do you think we will get a time jump? Because in the books, there's a huge gap of time between all these books. And right now, like, this book just happened. This season was literally like a year after the last season. And so it'll be very interesting because, as you said, we feel like we need a lot of growing up to do.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting to see when we'll get the next one because, again, yeah, Penelope and Colin, they're so young. Like, everyone's so young.
Yeah. Another one of our listeners says here that, like, I know some people say it'll be Pauline's story, which I'm fine with, but it's got me anxious about what's going to happen to Benedict, Eloise, and Francesca because the girl stories are happening around Penelope and Colin's, which would push Benedict's story way to the end. And that also it makes total sense because Benedict has had these little snippets. Like, if he was the finale, like, I could deal with that. But this listener says, like, help, I need reassurance because I need Sophie. I feel like, to me, and maybe this listener feels differently, but, like, to me, Sophie encapsulates just Benedict's love interest, whoever that becomes. I love Sophie. I actually really love An Offer from a Gentleman. I think it's like my top two in the series, which not a lot of people agree with. Others
are of the opinion it's not their favorite, which I'm kind of in there with, but it's a lot better than I remembered it being, and I definitely think it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun things I think that could go into the series with it. Like, there's a lot of fun elements.
Here's a couple other great ones that I think we should add because these are some different opinions. This listener says, honestly, I have no hopes for season 3. I love Shonda Rhimes, but she has gone too much off script to make me look forward to season 3. And I think that I really identify with that because of all my frustrations with this season. Like, I don't think I'm going to be particularly excited about next season.
Yeah.
Am I going to watch it? Like, yes, slowly. But I definitely don't know what they're going to do. And I feel like now they've done a real, like, look at all the different things we can do. We now can just do whatever we want.
Yeah.
So I'm a little
and I think someone else pointed out that they're really curious to see what they're going to do in the sense that, you know, Shonda Rhimes went so far off script. So it's kind of hard to look forward to what's happening in season 3. And someone else brought up the point that do they even want to bother introducing new characters right now? Because they have so many side things and they've introduced to so many characters that how are they going to keep introducing more? You know, like we already like the only one who doesn't really, we don't even know who the heck Francesca is because she's never there, which is terrible. But then also too, like we have Sir Philip Crane. Like we don't know who Benedict's going to end up with, but like we've technically already been introduced to 2 of the couples because we know the characters in that sense. We know Sir Philip and we know Colin and Penelope. Yeah. So like we just need to be introduced to someone who's going to be with Benedict or maybe, you know, Michael, John, maybe they just have Francesca getting married to John at first, you know? Like, could they at least have an episode where they go to Francesca's wedding? And
something
just acknowledge
like that,
Francesca exists.
Yeah, we returned from Scotland where Francesca got married. Yeah. I don't know. Well, I think that's really interesting. I don't know which way they're going to go, but I think that I like this comment as well that I wanted to share. This listener says, I hope they give some space for Eloise to be more than I don't want to marry. And I think that that is a really great point. Like I love that Eloise is all like about women's rights and a different political view and like messing up the aristocracy. I'm fine with all that. I think that, again, it became very caricature-y to me. And I would love to see her have a little bit more.
Well, yes, and exactly. And I think you're right. I don't want to marry. But then again, like in Eloise's story, she searches out someone to marry.
Yeah, like, she gets older and she realizes that she'd like that in her life.
Well, especially with, you know, seeing the relationship between Penelope and Colin, you know, keep divulged. She wants that. She's like, well, if my spinster buddy is going to be married, like, I would kind of like that too. I just always thought I'd have a buddy, and now I don't have a buddy. Which I guess makes sense. And like, it's like, I don't want to marry, but I don't need to marry because I have a partner and I've got a friend, you know, but I don't have that dynamic has changed. So who's going to be my partner and friend in that new dynamic? So,
yeah. So I feel like we could talk all day about Bridgerton and our thoughts. I don't think we even went through everything. We never mentioned Newton once, but hey, could have had more Newton.
Could have had more Newton. I mean, anytime there's a Corgan anywhere, I'm like, Gorg!
Yeah. However, I think a good way to wrap up today would be, Kelsey, what are your hopes for season 3?
Oh, that's a good question. I really hope they don't jump straight into Colin and Penelope. I think that there's a little bit more growth that needs to happen. I'm not seeing Penelope as the Penelope I know yet. And that's disheartening. Yep. I think that you got a little snippet of it. And again, that's where I was really mad, because then Eloise ransacks the room and is all upset with her and mad at her. And they have this huge row. And, you know, at the end of it, though, where she's like, they're at the ball and Penelope says this to that. And she's like, oh, it's so observant of you, Pen, you know? And you see like the mind ticking. I think they could have just left that there.
Yep.
And then Eloise could have just like secretly known. I don't know. But anyway.
Or slowly figured it out, like wheedled it out of her. I agree.
So I would like to see that relationship heal. And I would like to see them, like I said, I would like to see them kind of become like partners in crime in the Whistledown kind of jam. And have that kind of develop. And I would genuinely like to see Benedict have a story. I really love him, but I don't want his to be rushed. I don't want it to be a side plot. So I don't really know exactly. I'm very curious to see what happens in the next season. And I genuinely have no idea where they're going with this. Again, like you said, there was no teasers as to who was next. You know, I know which order the books are in, but I know that they might not want to go in book order. They might even have, I wonder if maybe they'll have 2 siblings in one season eventually. Yeah. You know, because again, they don't have a guarantee for 8 seasons. So maybe they do want to have a double up. My biggest hope is that they finally bring Francesca into the damn family and start talking about her. And I'm going to keep saying this because, again, her book was up there with Kate and Anthony's for a different reason. And I loved it so wholeheartedly. And the fact that, like, she was in, like, 3 scenes in this entire series. And they, like, at least in the first season, they're like, oh, Francesca's back from Bath or wherever the heck she was. They didn't even acknowledge the fact that she was nowhere to be seen this time.
Wait, who are you talking about?
Francesca in the first season. Oh, you're messing with me. That's cool. I was just on a passionate rant there, if you couldn't tell.
I was joking. But I got you. Yeah, I think I agree with everything you say as far as hopes. I don't disagree. I think for me, what I really hope is that they have more positive female relationships. I hope that they focus more on the central romance and a little less on the side plots. I would like to see less of Lady Danbury. I would like to see less of the Queen. And I would like to see less of Eloise unless hers gets better.
I would like to see Eloise more if she and Penelope are a team.
Yes, I think that would be much more interesting to watch. But I just mostly, like, I feel like they kind of lost their way with a romance. It didn't feel like much of a romance. And by the time we got back to our romance, I just wasn't even into it anymore. I was angry. I was angry that they took that from me. So I'm hopeful we will see little less Featheringtons. Like I said, I kind of enjoyed that story, but then when we got to the end and it's just he's gone, I hope he doesn't come back. He shouldn't be able to. He should be really ruined. And if he came back, like, you know, so I hope he doesn't come back, certainly in this next season.
I don't know. I think I would like to see a little bit less Featherington. I'd like to see just more matchmaking Portia instead of director of committing fraud.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, they now have enough money to live. However, she created fraud, which was so interesting because remember in Penelope's book, they did fall on hard times and Penelope used her whistle-down money to support the family.
Yes, she did. She pretended that an aunt who had died had left them an inheritance, and that's what saved the family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like, again, there's still like perfectly interesting ways to do it. Anyhow, so I guess that's what I want. I just want to see a little bit more focus on the central romance so that we get more of that romantic development between our characters, because I feel like Kate and Anthony were so great on screen together. The tension was so great, and then we just didn't get the payoff.
No.
In the way that you should in a romance.
I would agree with that. And I think I'm just thinking about it with season 1 again, because there were almost whole episodes where it was like just the Duke and Daphne, like barely anything else going on. But it was their furthering of the romance. And we didn't get this in it, which is, I think, why people, at least our listeners, are really hoping to see more of Kate and Anthony, because they did feel gypped in that sense. And we would like to see more of them. And I would be okay with Kate and Anthony being the side story and like, and having some sort of marital conundrum or quarrel or something like that. I don't know, but like they could be a side story. I'm here for that.
Or they're just fixing somebody else's problem. Like watching them fix somebody else's problem would be great.
Like mixing their hands in the pot with the siblings, because they both are like very protective older siblings. And so now that there's all the siblings, they have to help with all that.
Yes, for sure. Well, I don't feel like I'm done talking about this, but I think our episode is done.
I think so too. I think we've covered as much as we can. If we did not directly quote you or we did not share your opinion, we're so sorry. We had so many of them.
So many.
And I think, and all opinions are valid. We did not skip over anything because we just didn't like it. We just, as we said,
didn't get to
we
it.
just didn't get to it. We tried so hard, but there was a lot of opinions and they were all 100% valid.
Seriously. Well, we hope that you enjoyed listening to ours. We didn't even break to the parlor today. We were just so into it, which is really fun and great. But next week, we have a pretty interesting parlor for you guys. So I hope you stick around with us in our 100th episode.
Oh, yeah. We are on episode 100 next week.
Yes, or 2 weeks from now, technically.
Sorry,
but
whatever.
Next time. So if you would like to find us on social media, engage more in conversation with us, we love hearing from you. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at T as in Tom, N as in Nancy Strumpets, Facebook /TN Strumpets, and YouTube by searching our name. And I do want to say thank you to everyone who signed up for our YouTube channel, because now we passed that 1,000 subscribers mark and you guys helped us reach that. So yay. And thank you so much for helping us reach our goal.
Yes, thank you all so much. The reason we put on this show is because of listeners like you and the support you give us. So please talk with us, interact with us, send us a message. You're the reason why we're here.
Very true. And if you want to know what we're doing next time, because we teased it, it is our 100th episode. And we are kind of in the mood after especially talking about this Bridgerton, enemies to lovers, to talk about enemies to lovers.
Yeah, well, for our 100th episode, we thought we'd just talk all about our favorite trope.
Yes. So we are going to be bringing you a list of our favorites and some new ones and all sorts of different recommendations for enemies to lovers books next time.
Yes, we have a very comprehensive list. We even had to delve out of our Regency thing. I threw us over to America because I read the book separately, but it was just such a good enemies to lovers. It had to go on the list.
It did. I also read it. So anyhow, we can't wait to share that with you. So join us again next time as we talk about I Hate to Love You, our enemies to lovers list.
Ooh, that's good. And may all your ever afters end happily.